Step back with me into a time when the fate of a nation hung in the balance. Imagine the Valley of Elah, a deep trench in the land of Judah. On one ridge, the Philistines gathered for war, a dark force of iron and pride. On the opposite mountain stood the ranks of Israel under King Saul. For 40 days, a paralyzing silence reigned, broken only by one sound, the heavy tread of a giant. Goliath of Gath stepped out from the Philistine ranks every morning and every evening. He stood nearly 10 feet tall, a tower of bronze. His coat of mail weighed 5,000 shekels, and the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam. For 40 days, he defied the armies of the living God. He demanded a single combat to decide the war. But whenever his voice rolled like thunder through the valley, Saul and all Israel were dismayed and greatly afraid. They saw only the stature of the man and the glint of his brass. In that valley, it was not courage that ruled, but the dread of the inevitable. While the warriors trembled, a young shepherd was on his way. David, the son of Jesse, had come from the sheepfolds of Bethlehem to bring bread and parched grain to his brothers. He carried no weapons, only the scent of the fields and the spirit of obedience to his father. As David reached the perimeter of the camp, he heard the mighty roar of the Philistine. He watched as the men of Israel fled in fear. But David did not see what everyone else saw. Where the soldiers perceived an invincible monster, the shepherd boy saw an uncircumcised Philistine who dared to defy the God of heaven. David asked, "Who is this Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" Amidst seasoned warriors who judged only by the flesh, David was the only one whose gaze was lifted to the throne of God. He knew that the battle is not decided in the visible realm, but in the faithfulness of him who keeps Israel. King Saul sent for the boy. He looked at the youthful face and the slight frame and said, "Thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth." But David answered with the wisdom of the wilderness, "Thy servant kept his father's sheep. When there came a lion or a bear and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after him and smote him. The Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine." Saul relented and tried to force David into his own armor. He put a helmet of brass upon his head and armed him with a coat of mail. But David could not walk in them. He took off the metal. It is a truth of the word. The Spirit of God cannot be pressed into the armor of men. David took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones out of the brook, and put them in his shepherd's bag. With his sling in his hand, he stepped out into the open field. A shepherd against a giant, a prayer against a sword. When the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him. Goliath saw only a youth, ruddy and of a fair countenance. He felt insulted that Israel sent him not a warrior, but a child. "Am I a dog that thou comest to me with staves?" he roared, cursing David by his gods. Goliath cried out, "Come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air, and to the beasts of the field." He relied on his strength, on the thickness of his shield, and the reach of his spear. He was certain of his victory, for he knew only the laws of combat and matter. He did not see the invisible angels standing over the boy. He did not hear the rustle of the wings of the Most High. David, however, stood his ground. He did not recoil from the massive shadow that fell upon him. His voice was clear and firm as he replied, "Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield. But I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied." In this moment, the entire history of God's people was summarized. David shouted to the giant, "This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's." David did not rely on his skill. He relied on the covenant of God. He knew that the honor of the Almighty was at stake. While the giant cursed, David confessed the sovereignty of the Creator over the creature. Then the unthinkable happened. As the Philistine arose and drew nigh to meet David, David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. He did not flee from the storm. He ran into the heart of it. He reached into his bag, took a stone, and slung it. The air hissed as the small pebble left the sling. It was a single stone, guided by the hand that steers the worlds. The stone struck the Philistine squarely in his forehead, the one spot where no bronze protected him. It sank into his forehead, and the giant, who for 40 days had made Israel tremble, fell upon his face to the earth. Silence descended upon the Valley of Elah. The pride of the Philistines lay in the dust. David had no sword in his hand as he stood over the giant. He triumphed through the faith that moves mountains and fells giants. The Lord had kept his word. When the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled. But the men of Israel and of Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines. The paralysis was gone. The courage of one shepherd boy had awakened an entire nation. David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem. He kept the giant's weapons as a testimony of what happens when a man takes God at his word. He was no longer just the shepherd of Bethlehem. He was the anointed witness to the power of the Most High. This valley tells us to this day of the faithfulness of the Lord. It tells us that God looketh not on the outward appearance, but looketh on the heart. He needs no armies to save. He needs only a soul that trusts him without reserve. The mountains of Elah still stand. They are silent witnesses to what occurred when the light of truth met the darkness of pride. The story of David and Goliath is no fairy tale of a lucky chance. It is the confirmation that the Lord of hosts lives. When you look into your own valley today, remember the shepherd boy. Remember that the battle is not yours, but the Lord's. The stones are ready, and the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Go in the peace of the Lord. May the Spirit that strengthened David also guide you. Stay sheltered under the wings of the Most High. Until the next sunrise, God be with you.